Hello, and welcome to another edition of Generally Speaking. I'm your host, Bill Lawrence. Today is Wednesday, September 3rd, 2025. Please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notify bell. To be in a big shout out to Vex Zine. Who's that? Someone who subbed to my channel. Gotta love this person. Thank you so much. All right, starting with some alphabet soup, some letters SCO. SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. What is this, you might ask? Well, it's a bunch of countries, I think 20 something or so, coming together in, guess where? Shanghai. All right, China, if you didn't know. And it's all to discuss what? Cooperation. Ah, I think the title gave it away. So, what's going on here? Well, it's the more evidence of the change in the world power structure, where once the U.S. and the Europe, the West as they're called, were the only game in town, deciding what does and doesn't happen on the world stage. We now have other players rising to take their place, and they are taking their place. Europe has become almost a nothing now, and the SCO is up and coming with people working together. The third world, as they used to be called, the global south, as they used to be called, coming together to help themselves because the West and the US, certainly have never been doing anything to help them. Goodness knows. So it's interesting to mention this organization. I only heard about them recently. I had heard of the organization BRICS. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which now has a number of other member countries, and on top of that, a number of other affiliated friends of the BRICS member countries. And they sort of are fulfilling a similar role. Third world, global south countries getting together to help themselves because those Western thugs aren't helping them any. And you might kind of wonder, well, why do we have an SCO and a BRIC? Say they're kind of both the same thing. And yes, they are. But it's like an organic growing, in a fertile ground where conditions are ripe for people to start seeing common interests amongst themselves in their neck of the woods. And so we've got the SCO and the BRICS, and even though they're overlapping in purpose and in function, they're also overlapping in a lot of membership. A lot of the countries in the one are also in the country or the in the other, but that's okay. You can do that. We're all friends here. In fact, the SCO touts its ideas of non-interference, mutual respect, and equality. Those terms, they all sound nice. Sometimes things don't work out that way, but at least, it's nice to have a nice sounding foundation. So while I'm at that, let's mention another alphabet soup, RIC. So that's Russia, India, and China. And you can see these people getting their own initials because of this global south um, image. We've got Russia, India, and China are the big boys, the big players, next to everybody else. Malaysia, Indonesia, Pakistan, they're those are all small fry next to these behemoths, Russia, India, and China. And so it's interesting. And a thing about India, India sort of wants to, belong, right? But it also wants to strike its own kind of vision of it all, in the sense that it wants to keep good ties with the West. I guess economic ties. That's everything comes down to money, doesn't it? And I guess they've got a lot of relations, but the Trump administration has just put strain after strain on that. And in fact, that's a lot of the reason why these BRICS and SCO even exist, is because of the U.S. screwing them over. So they come together. Well, they're now proposing an new international development bank. There is an international development bank. There's something called the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, and there's something to do with development. I don't know the name of it, but it's all Western based and created. And it is, if you take money from them, you're taking money from the devil. Is usually how that always turns out. So they're proposing their own development bank, and they're also proposing a new money exchange system. Money, going between these countries doesn't just here take my money, wire transfer is done. No, you got to have complicated and involved processes and electronics. I don't imagine the technology is so much the issue as it is formulating the how are we going to recognize your money versus my money, and well, things beyond me. So, and it's a complicated affair right now. The one that's in place, been in place forever, the one from the west, is called SWIFT, which stands for something like exchange of money. All right, so the new one being proposed is CISP, and that stands for new exchange of money. So that's going on. It's just more to see that this third world development is going on. Being called third world, which you ordinarily used to sound, weak, and now I don't know, maybe the new world instead of a third world, the new world order. Yep, that's what's going on. So you know, um, politics in the news, sometimes you end up hearing about places you ordinarily wouldn't hear anything about, and suddenly they're in your consciousness. How about Armenia or Azerbaijan? Well, these two countries are right in the Middle East, where essentially Iran is. Which you remember, Iran, we bombed their nuclear facilities recently. So Armenia and Azerbaijan, I think they've had issues with each other. I mean, what two countries never have issues with each other? Did you know that there's disputed territories between the United States and Canada up there in the main area, up near the top? Where there's nothing but a couple of beavers and some timberwood, and probably a lot of ice. It gets cold up in them parts. And at any rate, there's some regions where we're still contested, but you don't hear any fights about it because, I mean, who cares what's up there? It always amazes me how two countries will allow, a place that's got pretty much nothing. And they're going to, fight to the death that, no, it's mine. No, it's mine. No, it's mine. You can't just say, look, draw a line through the middle. We're on this side. You're on that side. Have a nice day. Why not? And, here's a story actually similar to that did happen. The SCO I was just talking about, and India and China. Xi Jinping, the Chinese big guy, he was talking about, in reference to India, that it's time for the dragon and the elephant to dance. What imagery! You gotta like that. The dragon and the elephant, and time for them to dance. But while that sounds nice, they have disputed territory between the both of them, where they have defense forces. It's always defense. It's never offense forces. Well, they have forces there, military forces, and they've had skirmishes. They've had interactions. But I was listening to one of the commenters on World Affairs and talking about that, how they actually are trying to work that out. They are trying to work it out because in their minds, they've got more important things to work about than this little piece of land. And they actually are trying to work it out. It's a hard thing. I don't know. I guess it's a mental thing. They talk about sociology and psychology, right? Psychology, the individual, and sociology is how groups behave. Groups get a thing in their head, and it's hard to change it. And so when the group thinks this is our territory, we have to keep it. It's hard to get the group out of that thought. But I guess if you get the right elements happening in the right time, place, and blah, 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 it can happen. So it looks like India and China are trying to work that out. I hope they do. All right. So, I'm mentioning that Armenia and Azerbaijan. Why is that in the news? Well, there's some strip of land in there called the Zandizor Corridor, and at at this point in time, it's an important piece of territory, especially for Iran, and the transfer of material, I guess, goes across this strip of land between Iran and Russia and China and parts unknown. Anyway, a lot of traffic going through there, oil especially, and Trump. Trump managed to get his foot in there and make a deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Listen, you guys play nice, and we'll send you some suitcases full of money every month, and you'll be very happy. And we'll put, we'll give you some spy equipment. We'll give you things so you can both spy on each other and attack each other. I don't know, but at any rate, he's in there, and of course, Iran's in a tizzy. They don't need NATO right on their door, especially the U.S. that just tried to bomb their facilities out just recently. And so there's a whole ruckus going on in there, a place you never hear about, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and the Zandazur corridor. And there's tensions there. There be tensions there. And that can have the old world consequences with the United States in particular. If it's consequences between, who knows what little place and another, it's like, who cares, right? But it's the U.S. and Iran, which is becoming a big player now, especially with them shooting missiles at Israel, which they haven't done in a while, but there's a big threat to do that. The hostilities between Israel and Iran never ceased. I mean, there aren't any attacks going on at the moment. But Iran says, well, there was never any peace agreement. There's no ceasefire like we've said, yes, we're going to cease fire and you cease fire and we'll all just be ceasing our fire for a while. No, we did cease fire, and what they're doing, of course, is rebuilding their missile systems. They're getting enhanced surface to air missiles, which is what they seriously lack. They've got surface to surface. They can shoot from their surface onto the Israeli surface, but when Israeli planes come flying over or American B-2 stealth bombers come flying over, they're a little on the weak side there. So they've reinforced that with help from China, and now they're having much better radars and missiles that can actually do some damage. Fly over Iran now, you might get a different experience than you had before. So yeah, Iran's still a player, and Armenia, Azerbaijan. There we go. It's still in the news, although not greatly. But now you know about it, and you're more educated. Maybe you knew about it already. Why should I assume you don't know? You probably know more than me. I wouldn't be surprised. All right, let's get back to America. All right, Minnesota, the state of Minnesota. This comes up because another one of my topics channels I watch. I got to remember the name of this guy, the Thinking Atheist. I think that's what he's called, and he follows religious issues going on. And there's one going on in Minnesota, and just as part of this story, it comes to light. I mean, to us, to me, not you. I know you know it all. I'm ignorant. I'm just learning this stuff. That inside the Minnesota government, I'm not sure you've heard of things called a caucus. I love these. I love when people come up with funny words, fancy words for things you could say easy, like a group. An organization. No, we're going to call it a caucus. I wonder if they use caucus anywhere outside of politics, but caucus. Just talking about that. You ever hear of somebody exsanguinating? Exsanguinating. I was watching a show and they were talking about this person died. He exsanguinated. What's that? He bled to death. Can't say he bled to death. Gotta say he exsanguinated. Well, anyway, so back to caucus. What's this called? Minnesota has a caucus called the Secular Government Caucus. Oh my goodness, I can't believe it. When I first heard that Trump was forming a cabinet, a department, an agency, something like that, of religious affairs in the government, it just broke my heart, being the atheist that I am, that the separation of church and state thing just goes less and less worthwhile with things like this happening. And it did me heart good. It did me heart good to hear that Minnesota has a secular government caucus. What's the story behind that? Well, the state offers money. They'll give you money to colleges if you participate in some program that lets high school students, advanced placement high school students, take college level courses so they can get credit while they're still in high school. The smarty kids, those smarty kids, and they can go to these colleges, and the colleges get reimbursed, and so they get a nice, pretty penny, and so they're all in favor of that. But um, one college was taken to court. Two actually, two specifically, and these were two colleges participating in this program. But they would insist that any student coming to their school, take any classes, sign a document of faith that they support the Bible and are against anything the Bible is against. And basically, that's it. And so someone wanted to sue them, say, listen, yeah, I'm going there, but I don't support the Bible. I'm a Muslim or I'm an atheist. And yeah, I don't want it. So it gets taken to court that they can't do this. And a judge says, yeah, you're right. You can't do that. So there. And well, the schools take it to appeal. Always got that appeal option, and the appeals court says, I think the schools are right. You're being prejudiced against religious schools. And the people who said, what do you mean we're prejudiced against religious schools? We're not prejudiced against religious schools. In fact, this program is offered to plenty of religious schools in the state. There are like 10, 20 other religious schools participating in it. We're happy to have them. They just don't insist on anybody signing some religious statement. And the way that this person tried to justify that the schools had a point was, she said, listen, if some secular school made people sign an agreement that you would be beholden to truth and reason, and you have to admit that reason is supreme. Certainly, you state legislatures, you wouldn't find any problem with a school saying that, but you have a problem with the churches saying, these religious schools saying, you have to sign this thing about religious faith. So you're not being fair and equal. You would let a secular school get away with their secular expression, but you won't let the church. Well, I just had to first of all clarify that. It says the really what they should have said is, if the secular schools made a statement that you can't believe in religion, saying you believe in reason, who doesn't believe in reason? Most churches believe in reason. But I mean, I think where this judge was coming from was the statements that you get from a lot of churches that say faith comes before reason. That if you're putting your faith in reason, wrong. Whenever faith and reason come into conflict, faith is the story. So yeah, in a way, she was right about that the legislatures would complain, but I mean, they wouldn't complain about someone saying reason per se. But if you're looking at reason as interpreted, that it specifically infers that you do not have faith. That one of the oppositions of reason is faith, which I would kind of agree with that myself, because faith means believing something for no reason. Then I think the legislatures would disagree with it. I mean, I know myself, just if I was an imaginary legislator there, I would say, look, I'm not making anybody swear anything, any way, shape, or form. I'm just letting you go to school, and I don't want our students to be harassed from what they believe or do not believe. That's what I would say. So that was the interesting story about that, my little religious article issue there. Oh, by the way, I kept meaning to say, I want to recognize the sites that I get this from. So with the SCO, that Shanghai Cooperation Organization thing, that information comes from Lena Petrova on World Affairs in Context, and from Danny Haifang. All right, so that's where I got that from. Then this Minnesota school, that's the Thinking Atheist. Oh, actually, I did mention him with what's his name? He's got Meti. I'm sorry, I have to get his name next time. So now we got just going back to a quick little look at the UK. I mentioned this other videos. I don't know why I say I mentioned it. What's the point of saying I mentioned? I don't know. So, at any rate, the UK had picked a couple of organizations to designate as terrorist organizations because they go around, I guess, terrorizing in some way, shape, or form. And but one of the organizations they included was called Palestine Action. And everyone has said they're not a terrorist organization. That the furthest extent they ever go is maybe painting paint on military equipment that's being sent to Israel, and maybe doing one of those joining hands or chaining themselves to a chain link fence kind of thing. Clearly not in the terrorist category, especially compared to the other two organizations, which nobody else had a problem saying, well, yeah, those guys kind of go over the line there. And so it's been a big ruckus in the UK about how they're still calling this Palestine Action a terrorist organization. Protests all over the place. People in the streets. If you put up a sign, if you said, I support Palestine Action, you get arrested. And so they're still doing that. They're arresting people for you support Palestine. They're charging them with terrorism, supporting terrorism. And you can go to jail for 8 years for holding up a sign saying, I support Palestine Action. Who did I get that from? I didn't make my note of who I get that from, but this one I did. It's from the Rational National site by Dave Dolan. This guy I love. He's from Canada, and he comments on U.S. politics. Why not? He's right across the border, and considering the U.S. such a big country, lots of people comment on U.S. politics. Which reminds me, I want to talk about a young lady, Caitlin Johnston. And Caitlin is with a Caitlyn, I think. She's a great commenter. Her speech, her vocabulary, her writing style, it's very moving. It's not one of these. Today there was a protest on the mall. There were lots of people. No, she's very animated, very excited, and she even writes poetry sometimes. And she even does some art. It's crude, but I mean, it's still nice, better than what I can do. I can do a stick person, maybe, So anyway, Caitlin Johnston, and she's from Australia. See, people outside the country, and she comments on American politics. Mostly, lately, she's been commenting on those the people that support the genocide in Israel and just how sick and sick and sick it is. And so, but back to my fellow here, the Rational National channel was talking about a race in Maine. Again, we're back to Maine. Did I say Maine before? No, well, we're back to Maine now. They got a senator there, Susan Collins, who's been a milquetoast, do nothing kind of person, like sit on the fence, half vote with Democrats, which half the Democrats are pathetic anyway, and then half vote with Republicans. So this fellow is going to challenge her. His name is Graham Plattner. So I didn't know that Bernie was out and about again, out in the out on the stump, as they say, going out in the fields, and they had a oligarchy, no oligarchs tour and in Maine, and they had a huge crowd, over 6,000. 6,000, well, it's not huge, well, comparatively speaking, but considering Maine doesn't have a big population as a whole, even if you go to its biggest city, it's not a big population, and they weren't in the biggest city, so to get 6,000 people, yeah, that was a big crowd. At any rate, they had them giving their speeches and saying things, and every time there's a point, the crowd likes, yay, crowds clapping and everything. And one of the biggest ovations they got went on for like 30 seconds was when he said essentially this, that our tax dollars should be used to build schools, not bombs to destroy them in Gaza. And he got such an ovation. It went on and on. And so one of the noticeable events of this whole thing was how much cheering there was about the horrors going on in Gaza, and how this is what the general population thinks, but the politicians are afraid to say boo. They're afraid to say anything about it. I mean, finally, we're getting some people speaking up. You had the mayoral candidate, Zohran Mamdani, and now you've got this fellow here, Graham Plattner, and another one that was speaking there, which I'm assuming has the same feelings, was a person going for the Maine governor, Troy Jackson. So I went and I contributed to Graham. I gave my $10. That's how much I can give to people, and so I gave to that. and I hope he wins. I hope there's enough change in the 2026 elections to, at the very least, stop the Republican supermajority, so that we can stop whatever they do. Now, I don't have high hopes for some big turnaround because so many Democrats are just centrist corporate shills that take money from AIPAC, Israel, and it's hard to move the beast, the sludgy beast, until you get enough people in there doing the right thing. It's going to be hard to get good results. I mean, we need to do so much. We need to restore so much of the government that's been ripped apart in this country by Doge and Trump, organizations that were just shredded into nothingness, and to say nothing of agencies that are all headed by people that have absolutely no skills or qualifications, for their jobs whatsoever. What do we get the person that's in the head of education? What's the first thing they do? Let's eliminate the Department of Education. I don't think I really need a job here. What does the person in Health and Human Services do? He fires everybody in the Center for Disease Control, says the vaccines are a joke. So, yeah, I mean, the whole thing's a joke. Let's go to the top. Let's talk about a president who's a game show, who's a Hollywood's real estate mogul host. All right. Well, at any rate, let's go back to more international stuff. And let me cite this person, Danny Haifong. Again, here we go. And he was having a host on. His name was Scott Ritter. I listened to him a lot. He's a former military someone, something or another. And he was saying how, Trump would actually like to make a peace deal with Russia. And in that vein, the Americans, the United States, is wanting to get out of this war. But on the other hand, know that there are a lot of people around Trump that are out for Russian blood. All they care about is killing the Russian evil Satan on this world, and it doesn't matter if reality on the playing field of what's going on is different from how they'd like to see it. Russia is just winning this war, and the United States isn't going to be able to do anything about it, and yet they're going ballistic. These Russophobes, and they just want to keep going to the last Ukrainian is dead. Well, all right. So let's go back to a different thing, and this I am going to cite a site called Legal AF. I looked up what AF stands for, and it didn't sound like anything, so cool or appropriate. I mean, yeah, it was definitely wasn't something had nothing to do with it. But anyway, Legal AF, and who's the person? Michael Popak. All right, there we go. So he was mentioning how tariffs have been determined to be illegal. It's what the courts say, and not all kinds of tariffs. Apparently, there are different kinds of tariffs. There are tariffs against individual goods, like steel or aluminum. There are tariffs that are enacted just because you don't like what a country's doing, and you just say, like punitive tariffs. And then there are tariffs that are just because, well, you're tariffing me, I'm going to tariff you. What do they call retributive? Or now I forget the word, but it's you're tariffing me, I'm going to tariff you. And so the courts are saying that 90% of, this package of tariffs are illegal because only Congress can institute tariffs. And unless they specifically make a statute that says the president can, and so he can't. But what kills me is the court said, you know what? I'm not going to enforce it, though. The judge says I'm not going to enforce it. I'm going to, let it trickle up to the Supreme Court, and let them make the say so. And I just don't get it. If you said it's illegal, enforce the dang thing. But then here comes the next horror story. Who's going to enforce it? There's nobody to enforce it. And this is going to become a story, I think, a little bit later on. And if it doesn't, I hope I remember to bring it back up again. All right. So we got another site, Secular Talk with Kyle Kulinski. He's talking about the warmongering U.S. is doing with Venezuela, and that actually we've sent 8 warships down there, and It's ostensibly to halt drug trafficking. And the government had put out a video of look at what we've started, our opening salvo, as they say. Now opening salvo can often mean, here was our first argument, here was our first action that we took of some kind. Not really salvo as in bullet, but this one was bullets. They showed a little speedboat or some motorboat of some kind that is was said, this is the drug boat, bringing the fentanyl into our country. And it's some helicopter shot. I don't know how they got that. Maybe it was a helicopter, right? Or maybe it was a drone. But there it is, speeding through the water, and then bluey, gone. And so the commentator, Kyle, he was saying about this is madness. Now, you might want to say, well, they're bad druggies, cartel people, how they, take people off the streets, how they butcher people with their machetes. And, who cares what happens to them? Except who knows if that was them? All we see is a boat being blown up. That could have been just a little warning shot to Maduro in Venezuela. We're coming for you. And in fact, it is what their intention is to come for Maduro and take his oil. And if you think that's not the case, when you hear the story about who all is instigating this, some person who was head of a mercenary team when Trump was first in power, this gentleman was in like Flint with the Trump administration and was making money as a mercenary. He had his mercenary posse with him, and they were in Iraq. And they slaughtered a whole town full of people. Just started opening up their machine guns and killed like 40 people, innocent people just walking around the street. And they got tried and got convicted and got sent to prison, which Trump pardoned. He pardoned them. And so he's back with them. And this fellow has had it in for Maduro forever. And he's whispering into the ears of the people around Trump. Like who, for instance? Who would he be whispering to? Oh, let's see. Pete Hegseth, the head of the Defense Department. How would this guy have Pete Hegseth's ear? Well, he happens to be the brother of the head of the Department of Education, whose name slips me right now. DeVos, right? Nancy DeVos. So I mean, what are these connections? He knows who knows what and who, and so they're saying, we got to take him out. And there was a reminder of the Trump first administration with issues going on with them and Maduro. How there was an election that Maduro won, but it was contested by another person named Guaido, and the U.S. didn't recognize Maduro. They said Guaido is the real president, kept calling the president, had him, in this country at all kinds of social events, even had him at the State of the Union, introduced him to everybody. Just want to say, everybody give a good hello to the president of Venezuela, Guaido. Yeah, right. So I don't know the story of Maduro. I tried looking it up once, and I could see some shady things about the Congress deciding to not open up certain things for legislation that would have affected who gets elected or not. I don't know the story. I made a comment when I was reading the article. I would like to hear more about Guaido contesting this. Is there anything to it? But at any rate, we're sending warships down there. Whatever you can't just send warships down there and start blowing people up. Even if they were drug dealers, you don't blow them up. You pull them over. You say, "Come here, let's search your boat and see the drugs, and at least show the world the drugs." Which who knows? Even if they would, there could be just planted drugs. That's one thing about this world. So many things you don't know when the government is talking about it, and that's probably always been through history, and that's the way that goes. But they just blew up the boat anyway, so there's no question planting anything or not. So what else we got? Finally, are we getting back down there? Yeah, the Humanist Report with Mike Figueredo. The Epstein files, right? There's one of the government oversight committees is looking to get these files. Get these files. The White House was saying they're going to release the files. Pam Bondi said she's got them on her desk, and we're going to release them. And they're not. They're not. They're not. They're refusing to. So the oversight committee, or one of them committees, got enough people together to pushed something called a discharge petition. There's a lot of things, a lot of rules that go on in the Senate about how things work. You watch that Schoolhouse Rock, which was something that kids my age used to watch, and they would have a little cartoon character who looked like a rolled up piece of paper. He's a bill. I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill. And he goes to the Senate and he gets passed, and then the House has to get their version. But there are so many rules and regulations and powers that the speakers of the House and the head of the Senate have, and tricks they can do. I was reading a book that was talking about the manipulations that Johnson did when he was in the Senate. When he was, I don't think he was vice president yet, and it's really fascinating what goes on. At any rate, so we got this thing called a discharge petition, which will force the White House to produce these materials, and you need a certain amount of people to approve it, and they're very close. They were within a few. So what Mike Figueredo was pointing out is how the White House was threatening any GOP members, and I got to think that he's also referring to the Democrats. But I guess since he's the head of the GOP, he's threatening that anybody who goes along with this discharge petition will face consequences, whatever those consequences are. So they're really fighting this tooth and nail. So I'm just thinking, if there's one thing we know about this president and the White House at this point, is they only do whatever they want and don't do whatever they don't want. So I wouldn't be surprised if this discharge petition did get approved if they still don't produce it. I'd like to see what happens then. All right. So that reminds me of the story I was saying earlier, where the courts said the tariffs are illegal. And so they didn't enforce it yet, though. They're going to let the Supreme Court go to it. What happens if they wanted to enforce it? In fact, what happens if anybody wants to enforce anything on Trump? We've got him sending troops now, he said, to Chicago, coming very soon. They're going to be in Chicago. Now, who's going to stop him? Who's going to stop him? He can put troops in every city, and who's going to stop him? You know, only the troops themselves can stop themselves. I'm thinking, what happens if he wants to they're talking about arresting any of the federal officials that do things they're not allowed to, which essentially they're not allowed to do anything except guard federal buildings. They can't arrest anybody. They can't inquire anybody. They can't do anything unless the police ask them. But there's a big ruckus right now that's been building up already ahead of time. No, we're not going to help you. So what happens when they come in and they start doing stuff they're not allowed and they have to be arrested? Who's going to arrest them? The military, the Fed, they're going to pull out their guns. Cops pull out their guns. Who's going to shoot? Anybody? These are horrible times. Horrible, horrible times. I hope we can survive through the 2026 elections and get enough people in. I'm just really afraid that all these militaries in all these states are being placed so that they can interfere with the elections. So they can just commandeer the voting machines and say there was something wrong, or just call militia, military law. I'm missing the wording here, but call military law and just stop elections, not even be elections. What's going to happen then? You're going to say, "Oh, you can't do that." We did it. What do you think now? How this could come? Who would have ever thought we would come to this? Unbelievable, unbelievable. Well, I'm not a religious man, but I pray that everything works out. You have a good one. Take care, and thank you again for my new subscriber. Bye now.